So, as a person who appreciates the game, uh, who do you think is the greatest poker player of all time?
That's a tough question.
Can an AI help answer that question? Can actually AI analyze the quality of play? Right. So the AI chess engines can give estimates of the quality of play. Right. Um, I wonder if is there an ELO rating type of system for poker? I suppose you could, but there's just not enough. You would have to play a lot of games, right? A very large number of games, like more than you would in chess. The deterministic game makes it easier to estimate ELO, I think.
I think it is much harder to estimate something like ELO rating in poker. I think it's doable. The problem is that the game is very high variance. So you could be profitable in poker for a year, and you could actually be a bad player just because the variance is so high. I mean, you've got top professional poker players that would lose for a year just because they're on a really bad streak.
So yeah, so for ELO, you have to have a nice, clean way of saying if player A played player B and A beats B, that says something. That's a signal. In poker, that's a very noisy signal.
It's a very noisy signal. Now there is a signal there, and so you could do this calculation. It would just be much harder. But the same way that AIs have now taken over chess, and all the top professional chess players train with AIs, the same is true for poker. The game has become a very computational. People train with AIs to try to find out where they're making mistakes, try to learn from the AIs to improve their strategy. So now, yeah, so the game has been revolutionized in the past 5 years by the development of AI in this sport.
The skill with which you avoided the question of the greatest of all time was impressive.
So my feeling is that it's a difficult question because just like in chess, where you can't really compare Magnus Carlsen today to Gary Kasparov, because the game has evolved so much. The poker players today are so far beyond the skills of like people that were playing even 10 or 20 years ago. So you look at the kinds of like all-stars that were on ESPN at like the height of the poker boom. Pretty much all those players are actually not that good at the game today. At least the strategy aspect. I mean, there might still be good at like reading the player at the other side of the table and trying to figure out like, are they bluffing or not? But in terms of the actual like computational strategy of the game, a lot of them have really struggled to keep up with that development. Now, so for that reason, I'll give an answer, and I'm going to say Daniel Negreanu, who you actually had on the podcast recently. I saw it was a great episode.
I'm gonna love this so much,
and
Phil's gonna hate this so much.
And I'm gonna give him credit because he is one of the few like old school, really strong players that have kept up with the development of AI.
So he's constantly studying the game theory optimal way of playing.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think a lot of the old school poker players have just kind of given up on that aspect. And I got to give Daniel Negreanu credit for keeping up with all the developments that are happening in the sport.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch. It's fascinating to watch where it's headed. Yeah, so there you go. Some love for Daniel.